So I want to share from the Food Revolution Network about longevity patterns. So I feel it's really interesting to note that being healthy and fit is not only it's not only about supplements and like having a gym membership that you use 5 times a week and eating like a certain exact amount of calories. Interestingly enough, the people who live in what they call the blue zones, which are people who are more likely to live 10 times more likely to live 100 than the people in, let's say, the USA, to live over 100, to live to 100. So what are some patterns that were discovered was actually connection, feeling that they were part of communities where they were seen and needed, and strong social ties, a sense of purpose, and not doing those habits that self-harm came part of that, like not smoking or eating toxic food, and then they ate a diet rich in fiber. What does that mean? That they ate like what's called a peasant food diet. Most places in these blue zones had 3 of one of the whole grains, rice, corn, or wheat. And when they ate the wheat, it was like mostly in the grain style, not like as ground as we eat it, and different like whole grains. And then they ate things which are called tubers, which is squash, sweet potato, and potato. And then whatever was seasonally growing in the garden, as well as almost all of them ate beans, about 1 cup a day. These are whole plant foods. They're mostly local, and whatever else was growing in the garden, right? And minimally processed, and they're shared in community. And some would say, let's say you have a plate, you have a quarter whole grains and a quarter plant protein, if you're going to eat plant protein or protein, and a half is colorful fruit, vegetables, you could say seeds, nuts, berries. And regarding exercise, it turns out that pretty much the work you would do to survive and live in the world in the way our ancestors used to, things where you have to carry weight, you have to carry a load, you have to be strong, you have to resist, like let's say push things, and a lot of practicing balance with how you're moving around, and even grip strength. You have to carry things and pull things and push things, and it's basically how they made food and washed their clothes and built a house. And so what's really interesting is that these kind of activities affect their memory, their focus, their mood, and their resilience. And we're starting to see activity is not about chasing youth and looking like you have a youthful body. It's actually about preserving your vitality and your capability for the life that you want to live. And even if we think about how much they used to have to walk up and down hills, or just to like carry things, or like climb, there was a lot of climbing involved. We learned that it's critical for the brain, for the blood to move upwards through leg strength. It pumps the blood. And I've also learned separately the white blood cells have to do that. Additionally, people used to sleep a lot. They didn't have phones and computers, and they also didn't have these overhead lights. There was candles and lamps, if that, and sometimes you just went to bed when it was dark. And this affects brain function in many ways, immune resilience and blood pressure regulation, as well as, speaking of, I say sleep, I start to get tired. Stress, it also affects the lymphatic system, the glymphatic system, which is in the brain, and stress management. And there are different comments people make about how to eat. Some say it's ideal to have the first meal earlier and just one small meal a little later, skipping the third meal that most people have. And when I used to meditate with a group of people, we did that. And I ended up feeling pretty well, actually, so sleeping on an empty stomach. Some say you can eat light food before bed. And then in terms of like when to sleep, the circadian rhythm, the hormones in the body actually align and are secreted and distributed properly most when you're on the natural light cycle. So it turns out the light itself affects our hormone producing glands. Now, interestingly enough, there is something that most people don't realize has a lot to do with wellness. But if you think about how communities and tribes and our ancestors managed in order to get us till now, it says like, no man is an island, you can't do it alone. Actually, you have to give. One of the best ways to promote longevity, surprisingly, but maybe not surprisingly to many people who practice this lifestyle, is much better than short-term buying for yourself. And, that produces some level of happiness that makes someone have, the will to live and connect to life. But even more than that, you have temporary experiences, which give us the will to live and make us feel connected to life. But actually, what releases the most sort of like gratitude and connection to life and the will to live really is giving, and especially to strangers. And this nullifies dangers of anger and stress, which are very dangerous according to what they're saying. And the soil itself that used to be in the gardens, private gardens, were full of microorganisms, minerals, and there was family gardens and fields, which means that decades of farming builds the soil. It becomes rich, nutrient-dense soil. And there is some more literature I want to read. Because I like to think about the fact that if we look at what happened, we reflect. So now we talked about our ancestors and we think about how we could go forward, really to keep the world a better place for, the future, like, for our future self. And you could think of that as your own future self, children. And so I like to do work with my inner child. And so there's a community called ACA, and there's some literature. Adult children of, it's called alcoholics or dysfunctional families. And so perceptions are learned. Children need to believe. This is what happens to cause things. And what we can use this for is to do better in the future, to have a better life. All right. Perceptions are learned. Children need to believe. This is pain, shutdown, and survival. Perceptions are learned. Children need to believe that their perceptions of reality are accurate and can be trusted to guide their behavior and to keep them safe from harm. They become obedient to what they believe is true and follow what they hope is the best path for finding happiness, peace, and joy. Children look to authority to help them define what's real and make sound decisions in relating to others. The support of responsible authority gives them confidence in developing their own ability to effectively live in the world. Stinkin' thinking is learned. The tragedy for children in a dysfunctional home is that they're robbed of a model for living that's based on a responsibility to sanity. At the core of dysfunctional thinking is the insane belief that self-destructive behavior could lead to serenity and peace of mind. I'm going to read that again. At the core of dysfunctional thinking is the insane belief that self-destructive behavior can lead to serenity and peace of mind. The abuse of, for example, alcohol becomes a model for destruction. The attitude of abuse that underlies all addictive behavior dominates the family, and children learn to accept this attitude in others and themselves, and by practicing and supporting a pattern of self-annihilation, one generates and conveys, one generation conveys to the next, a never-ending cycle of despair. And that's why we disrupt it. So we talked about, responsibility to sanity. What's insanity? It's when the children are compelled to deny the reality of pain and abuse. Once children have accepted the idea that dysfunction or the parents' alcoholism isn't violent and dangerous, when they know it is. They know it is. They have no basis once they accept that it's not violent or dangerous. They have no basis for deciding what's real or for knowing how to respond to those around them. They no longer trust authority to guide them and protect them from harm. They are paralyzed by indecision and grow to hate themselves for being confused and vulnerable, for needing to be safe and secure. They learn to survive by punishing themselves for being vulnerable and by denying their need for love. And I want to pause here and say that I felt that there was someone I was dealing with closely. Two separate people actually came to mind that they wanted me. It's like what gaslighting is called. It's a fun word people like to throw out. Not fun, it's a trendy word. Somebody tries to make you doubt your reality. And I feel like there's two men that I was involved with at certain points in the last year or so. And significant parts, like over a month or two. A few months to a year, more than a year. And the idea that I felt self-loathing when I tried to believe that I was to blame and it was not, and it was safe and it wasn't violent or dangerous what they were doing. And that's how a person learns to self-abuse, because the self-abandonment, it's this sense of self-betrayal and self-abandonment that's the source of rage and despair in adult children. So a child who grows up with these unresolved, who live into realities attempting to meet the needs of a mature adult while seeing the world from the perspective of a frightened child. Neither personality aspects fully comprehend or understand the motives or actions of the other. The adult need for interdependence and self-expression seems to be in direct conflict with the child's need to be dependent and gently controlled. The frustration of being forced to choose between two competing points of view built into a rage on each side of the personality, and each side struggles to be heard by the other. Rage turns into despair when we realize the legacy of insanity we inherited from our dysfunctional or alcoholic home does not provide for the well-being of either the adult or the child. And then we enter the program if we need, in order to have a different life, because we want to have a long, healthy life. We want to be connected to community, like everything we talked about till now. Okay, all the best. Bye-bye.